Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Leinberger to Mobile, Alabama.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Nick. PNC's my bank up in Washington, where you may have heard we won the World Series. For a town that you love to hate, it's finally nice to have something that people can really admire, so thanks. I was here about 10 years ago, and you've grown a lot. But today it's a challenge for you now. I'm going to offer you a challenge, which is you've got to do it a whole lot more in the future, because your competition is really very good, very strong, and you've got a lot of assets that you're not yet taking real advantage of. So what I want to talk about is your goal and what you're trying to do here in downtown. I refer to it as the 3 E's: economic growth, environmental sustainability, and social equity. And these great walkable urban places, particularly downtowns, that's what they do when all cylinders are firing. So just to make that go in a bit more depth, that we want to have this be the economic foundation of your metropolitan area, and we know that if you don't have a great downtown, it's not just because it's the heart of the city, it's not just because it's a nice thing to do. From an economic development point of view, you will lose if you don't have a great downtown. And that goes for your shipping business, that goes for your jet manufacturing, that goes for your ship manufacturing. These companies are looking for great walkable urban places. Even if they don't locate their businesses here, their executives demand it. Number 2 is, from an environmental point of view, we now know that building walkable urban places is the #1 way we're going to address climate change. And you're sort of on the bleeding edge of climate change with the Gulf rising continuously for the foreseeable future. And then finally, equity. Walkable urban places are the most socially equitable places in our country. And that, unlike the suburbs where you segregate by income, by race, walkable urban places integrate. So those are the goals that you're trying to achieve here. But a lot of the time, you're thinking about this with an old format. It's urban versus suburban. And that's now obsolete. What we've learned is that walkable urban places are now going to both center cities and to the urbanizing suburb. But however, the last 50, 60 years, we've fundamentally turned our back on the walkable urban places like downtown. And you probably know that 100 years ago, all we built was walkable urban places. This downtown was much more vital 100 years ago than it was, say, in 1980, 1990. And that was because we, as a people, invented drivable suburban places. And we pushed the pendulum all the way over to just build drivable suburban places, low density, segregated land use, segregated by race, segregated by income. And we did this throughout the country. So I'm a great believer, this will demonstrate the depth of my scholarship, that I'm a big believer that television is one of the great predictors of social trends. And so television shows us what we are really aspiring to. So back in the 50s, we were aspiring to drivable suburban places. But most of us lived in walkable urban places back in the 50s. But popular television shows really captured that essence. So one of the best ones is I Love Lucy. January 1957, third week in January, Lucy got this harebrained scheme that she wanted to move from Midtown Manhattan out to the suburbs. And in this clip, she shows all the thinking that we all have about why we want to do this. And then you see her moving out to the suburbs. Please.
Oh, Ethel, there's nothing like living in the country. Clean, fresh air, homegrown food.
Lucy, you're not thinking of moving, are you?
Why not? It'd be great for little Ricky. And Grace took us to see the most wonderful house that's for sale. A quaint old early American.
So all the common reasons, she nailed them. Here she is looking out over the skyline of New York, feeling badly that she's leaving. Of course, it's the back set of Universal Studios in Hollywood.
Well, here we are. No more tears, honey?
Oh, no, I'm fine now that we're here. Gee, isn't this exciting? We're in our very own home. The first house we ever had.
So Lucy then made a mistake. In the next week's episode, she invited Fred and Ethel to come out and visit. And 2 weeks later, they moved out. Hence started the entire suburban movement. And one of the things that Fred and Ethel and Lucy found out is that as you moved out to drivable suburban places, as you built more, the quality of life went down. That next strip mall next to your single-family home or that next subdivision next to your single-family home, you fight, working through your neighborhood groups. And it's rational, because we now know that drivable suburban, as you do more of it, the very qualities that Lucy talked about goes away. But then a funny thing happened back in the late 1990s into the early part of the 21st century, is that pendulum started to move back. We began to see downtowns like Mobile turn around. We didn't expect this. This is not the way that we built this country for 50, 60 years. And we saw more and more downtowns turn around, downtown adjacent places, suburban town centers come back to life. And so we now know that there's a new lens that we need to have. It's where are the walkable urban places, whether they're in Center City or in the suburbs, and where are the drivable suburban places, whether they be in the Center City or in the suburbs. So it's a new lens, a new way of understanding how we're building our country, which, by the way, the amount of assets that go into the built environment, mere 35% of our wealth. It's the largest asset class in the entire economy. And that's why we in real estate are so proud of the fact of the last 3 recessions, we caused 2 of them. So a lot of television shows that erupted in the 1990s forecasting this shift back to walkable urban. But the one I picked is Sex and the City, and just recognize that here this is a former industrial section of a New York City, and single women dressing up by themselves in what 20 years earlier you wouldn't be caught dead in those kind of places. Then again, you might have been. Please.
Miracle. I am in my skinny jeans. I haven't fit into these since 1985, and that is only because I had mono.
So all of our kids were watching this. And again, this is not Hollywood telling us what to do. This is Hollywood reflecting what we want. They have more consumer research, better feedback than probably any industry in the country, and they're reflecting what we want. So when you look at those 2 ways of building, walkable urban and drivable suburban, those are the only 2 ways we can build the built environment. And then we have local serving places and regionally significant places. Local serving places are bedroom communities. Regionally significant places are places like downtown, where the wealth of the society is created. And so this is a simple 4-cell matrix that all metro areas, you can drop all their land into one of these 4 cells. And the upper left-hand corner, what we call walk-ups, walkable urban places, which includes downtown, that's roughly 1% of the land mass of the region in most metropolitan areas. 1% of the land mass are these walkable urban places where the wealth of the metro area is created. Now, there's also down below edge cities. These are also very important. They're important to have as a place to create wealth, but they're no longer growing, as I'll show you in just one second. So when you look at the 2 cells, those 2 green cells, walkable urban neighborhoods, walkable urban places, they total about, most metro areas, about 2% of the land, maybe 4 at most. It's a very small percentage of the metropolitan land. And what I'm just about to show you is that what's happened in this real estate cycle throughout the country is that the vast majority of growth in this country are now going to that 2%. And that's why it's so critical for you to focus your economic growth in places like downtown. So we, every couple, 3 years, we survey the 30 largest metros in the country. This is where about 60% of the GDPs generated. And we look at, and we rank them based upon their walkable urbanism. And some of the findings are that there's 761 of these walk-ups. Again, downtown Mobile is just one of them. And that what we did is we looked at the office, retail, multifamily housing, and looked at what percentage of their total inventory was in walkable urban places. And here's the rankings. No surprise, metropolitan New York City is number 1. A big surprise, Denver has jumped up to number 2. They were number 8 3 years ago. What we think has happened is that Denver invested in rail transit, and it's now paying off. 3 is Boston, 4 is Washington, San Francisco, and Chicago. So no surprise, right? These are the, except for Denver, these are the most walkable urban places. The thing is that the walkable urban space has a mere 75% price per square foot premium in their rents. People are willing to pay 75% more on a price per square foot basis in rent for a walkable urban space than a drivable suburban. What we're finding throughout the country is that business parks are tanking. And then when you add what's known as a cap rate, for those of you that are in real estate, which is a way of understanding what the valuation of that property is, it goes to over 100% valuation premium for walkable urban places. And some places, it's not just 75% price premiums, we're seeing 100% and even 200%, 3 times higher price premiums for walkable urban stuff than drivable suburban. And that 75% price premium has gone up 19 percentage points since 2010 when this cycle started. So it's still ramping up. It hasn't peaked yet. In those 30 metro areas, of the net absorption of new space, 51% of it has been walkable urban. And that includes Metro DC, where 91% of all new growth in real estate was walkable urban, going to 2% of the land. In Denver and Boston, it was 99% of all net growth went to walkable urban places. And we're also seeing, therefore, market share gains. That the market is, for walkable urbanism, is capturing more market share, which means drivable suburban is losing market share. In fact, it's gaining market share so fast, more than twice as fast as its market share back in 2010, that it is just leaving the business park world and the regional mall world behind. The last time we saw that kind of market share change was back in the 1980s, going the opposite direction, as we were abandoning our cities and walkable urban places and moving out to the fringe. So what does this mean from a social equity point of view? Counterintuitively, the most socially equitable places in the country are the walkable urban places. And again, that may not make sense with all these price premiums, right? But it turns out that when you live in a walkable urban place, you don't spend as much money for transportation. Yes, the housing costs a bit more in walkable urban places, but your transportation costs are pretty much cut in half in a walkable urban place. And so when we look at low-income households, their number 2 household spending is for transportation. If you drop one car out of your household, the AAA tells us that we spend about $9,200 per year to own, operate, service, park, insure a car. $9,200 per year. You drop that one car out of your household, invest it in a mortgage at 4%, you can increase your mortgage capacity by $150,000. Houses, particularly walkable urban houses, tend to go up in value. Cars always go down in value. So here are the list of the most socially equitable metro areas in the country. Look familiar? Pretty much the same as the most intense walkable urban places, led by New York, and second is Washington, D.C. Again, the reason is that low-income households don't have to spend as much money on transportation. However, what we do need is a really aggressive affordable housing rental program to address the need so we don't have displacement, but we know how to do that, and these places are making so much money, we can afford to do it. So why do we do this from an economic point of view? It's because you're going to get smarter and you're going to get wealthier. This is a scatter plot, and the 6 most walkable urban metros are in the upper right-hand corner. That's New York and San Francisco and Seattle. In the upper right-hand corner, the most drivable suburban metros like Tampa and Phoenix are on the lower left-hand corner. And we have found a very high correlation between the education level of the metropolitan region and their walkable urbanism. You have a more college educated, more graduate degree educated, if you have walkable urban places. Now, this is a correlation. We don't know whether it's causal or not. We don't know whether walkable urban places attract higher educated workers or whether higher educated workers create walkable urban places. We don't know that. But we do know that those most walkable urban places, 42% of the population have their college degree, as opposed to those lowest ranked, 31%, so that's a 35% premium as far as more college-educated folks in the workforce. So what does that mean? Look at the GDP per capita. The most highly walkable urban places also are just plain wealthier. They have a much higher GDP per capita. Every man, woman, and child in those walkable urban 6 metros make $75,000 per year in GDP, as opposed to the least walkable urban, which is under $50,000. That's a 52% premium in how much people make. That's the difference between Germany's GDP per capita and that high powerhouse Romania or Russia. It's a first world, second world gap in economic performance. It's important. And we're seeing this throughout the entire country. What we have proven for the first time in this survey that we've done, again, we've done it 4 or 5 times now, is that all 30 of these metropolitan areas are moving in the same direction. There are leaders and there are laggards. So on the left there, you can see Washington, D.C. In 2010, about 1/3 of all office space and multifamily rental housing was in walkable urban configuration. The absorption, as I mentioned earlier, in this cycle was 91%. So they're growing 2.8 times faster in this cycle, gaining market share. Atlanta's doing the same thing, but they're just a little bit behind. About 50% of their total absorption in this cycle has been walkable urban, 3.1 times faster than their base in 2010. But even Dallas-Fort Worth, sprawling Dallas-Fort Worth, only 9% was walkable urban in 2010, but 21% absorption today, 2.3 times faster. Every metropolitan area is now shifting. It's a Doppler shift that's taking place. There are leaders and laggards. Everybody's going in the same direction. And everybody's only using a couple percentage points of their land. So this is not going to affect, if you're living in a suburban location now, it's not going to affect you, except insofar as your entire region will get wealthier. So we've looked at what we call third-tier metros. That includes you. These are metros between 200,000 and 750,000 in population. There's about 121 of these places throughout the country. There's 19 or so that really have advanced, and they've become models. And some of these are the places that you really need to model yourself after. In fact, you are modeling yourself after. So here's just a few models. I was just here last week in Grand Rapids, downtown Grand Rapids, which is in the western part of the state of Michigan. And they have embraced their downtown. And they've embraced their river. Water is gold. And walkable urban real estate with water views and water access, it's platinum. And I think you know where this is going. Grand Rapids, their market share of walkable urban continues to grow in this cycle through 2014. We don't have current data right now. About a third of all their absorption went to walkable urban places, mainly downtown. Ann Arbor, another Michigan town, is just exploding. Now, they are based upon the University of Michigan. And that's higher education is a great accelerant of walkable urban. Why? Because the students want it. The students demand walkable urbanism now. That's why most universities that are in a walkable urban places are rising in the ranks of the U.S. News and World Report. Lancaster, Pennsylvania, home of Franklin and Marshall College, and a complete collapse as far as their industrial economy. They've come back with the arts, with tech, with with their college and with medical. Note the baseball stadium. Most minor league baseball stadiums are now going smack into the middle of downtown. Why? Because they perform 30 to 50% better as far as attendance, and because they don't have to build any parking. They can use the office parking at night and on weekends when it's empty, increasing the value of the office buildings, increasing property taxes, and you don't have to build parking. Downtown Greenville, many of you have been there. Downtown Greenville and the next one I'm going to show you are really international towns. They have attracted lots of international corporations, particularly from Europe. And the reason both of these towns have been so successful is because they have great downtowns, and therefore they are attractive to the executives coming from Germany and France and Italy who expect that. They don't want a dump of a downtown. It would be very hard to get those executives to move to their U.S. Facilities. And then here's my favorite, because I've been working on downtown Chattanooga for 35 years. And this, again, was a Rust Belt town that collapsed, and they turned their back on the river. And today they've embraced the river. They've led a multi-billion-dollar effort to turn around the downtown. The reason they got Volkswagen's major U.S. plant was because it had a great walkable urban downtown. And the thing that I like to show you about Chattanooga is that they've also started developing around downtown. This is what we refer to as downtown adjacent. And you're doing the same thing, but they have remarkable expansion outside of the downtown as far as, and in particular for housing. Now here we are, downtown Mobile. You've got a phenomenal setting, just glorious. You've got some of the most beautiful parks, but you can do far better. So when it comes to development, this is the model that you're following. This is a conventional redevelopment of a downtown. It starts with urban entertainment, which you've been doing quite well, restaurants and music and festivals, you know, the Mardi Gras, that's all urban entertainment. That's where most of these places start. You give a downtown a there. Then comes rental housing. Young people coming downtown. Where their parents were too scared to go downtown, the kids come downtown. They're immortal. And so rental apartments start populating. It's at that point that you've got to start thinking about that aggressive, affordable housing program, because you're going to be successful, and it's going to be the most expensive place to live in the region. That's what all these places have become. And you've got to have an aggressive, affordable housing program, particularly for rental housing. Then comes the for sale housing. These are people that need to have the confidence that they cannot just buy a great place, but they could sell the place someday. And they need to have the confidence that their number one asset in their personal portfolio is going to go up in value. Then, with all those rooftops, you can get local serving retail. And thank goodness you now have a second grocery store coming downtown. That's a really important thing. It's a great hallmark as to how you're making progress here, because you've got to have rooftops to support those grocery stores. It's not a great model when you tell the grocery store, come on downtown, in 5 years you'll have a lot of customers. And then finally, you begin to get office and other employment in major ways. And that's because the number one location factor for office location is, where do the millennials want to live? We did a study of 500 corporate relocations working with Cushman and Wakefield out of New York, looking nationally. And the number one reason that all these companies moved to walkable urban places like here in downtown is to attract the young folks. 30 years ago, it was, where does the boss live? Today, it's, where do the young people want to live? By the way, the number two reason we found in this survey was because of branding. That 21st century companies want to be in hip, walkable urban places. Being in a business park is oh so 20th century. So how do you get there? How you get there is what you've done with Downtown Mobile Alliance. It's called place management. We've had in this country 3 levels of government for 250 years: federal, state, local. At some point, we're going to get a missing level of government or governance, which is at the regional level, at the metropolitan level. But we're not there yet. Where we are going, though, is the 4th level of governance, is place management. That's what Elizabeth and her team does. And I didn't say place government, I said place management, place governance. We tend to find the best models are what I refer to as private-public partnerships. I intentionally flipped that phrase because it's the private sector that has to lead, because for every $1 of public money invested, $10 to $15 of private money. So hence, private-public partnerships. And so what Elizabeth is doing here is that she's looking at the social design. She's focusing on public health, social equity, how to get these things developed and financed, how do you implement it all, dealing with public policy. But she's the orchestra conductor to make it all happen on a 24/7 basis. Yes, it's important to have the public sector at the table. They set the table, but the private sector does, the bulk of the investment, but it's place management that brings it all together and makes it work. And what we see, this is stealing blatantly from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which that as you become more aware and more accomplished, you can basically become self-actualized. Well, applying it to a place, you start with a basic infrastructure and the right kind of infrastructure that's walkable, urban, high density. Second is to make it clean and safe. Without clean and safe, nobody's going to show up. Then we have to manage that infrastructure on a 24/7 basis, the parking, the parks, all sorts of other things that are going to be taken over by place management. Then economic development, culture, building more infrastructure, by the place management organization, floating millions of dollars of bonds. And then finally, perhaps getting into catalytic development, tying up land, making it ready to get back into the private sector, and ideally taking on social equity. I would hope the goal for all place management organizations in this country is that anybody that works downtown, no matter what level of work they're doing, could live downtown if they so choose. So that's what I'm hoping will be the goal, to make this a mixed income, mixed race place. And what you'll do is you're going to create just what you've seen here today is a could only be here place, could only be in downtown Mobile. This is not something that's been transported from Dallas or Atlanta. It reflects you as people, and people will then come to see you as people, and they want to experience what life is like. It's just the reason why you go to Paris. It's the reason why you go to Manhattan. They want to come and see and feel and understand how you're living, your uniqueness that you only have. So there's some examples that I'd like to end with as far as parks in particular, and then give you a couple to do things. Dallas, believe it or not, the suburban poster child of sprawl, has really made some great strides, and probably the best thing Dallas has done at the place management level is build Clyde Warren Park, which is a 5-acre park on top of a 12-lane freeway that's underground. They buried it, and they connected downtown and uptown. The private sector did this. They manage it on a 24/7 basis, and it's one of the most exciting places in the Southwest. And it has increased property values 30–40% within 5 blocks on either side of it. And it is a complete private-public partnership. The other one that we all look at, again, from a park management point of view, is Bryant Park. Bryant Park is also about 5 acres, a little bit less, on 42nd Street, behind the New York Public Library, that Beaux-Arts beautiful building. The library was going to leave because Bryant Park had become what became known as Needle Park. The city was managing it as part of the park's budget, $250,000 per year, and for that, they got the best drug dealing center in Midtown Manhattan. And so the library was going to leave, and all the property owners around it turned their back on it. This is what Bryant Park looks like today. By far the best park we have in the country, all done privately. It was privately redeveloped from a capital point of view, and now is managed by the Bryant Park Business Improvement District. And it's not $250,000 per year. Their budget's $22 million per year, 85% of which is generated on site. So it took this 5 acres, and the public parks people were saying, gee, how do we deal with 5 acres on 42nd Street? We don't have the resources. To who couldn't make money with 5 acres on 42nd Street? And it's a remarkable place to visit. So a bit of a to-do list that you should understand that 80–90% of economic growth in the knowledge economy and in the growing experience economy, which is layering on top, is going to happen in your walkable urban places. If you're not creating great walkable urban places, you're not competitive. Second thing is that these regionally significant walkable urban place management organizations, like the Downtown Mobile Alliance, right now you start with clean and safe. You're doing that, moving into economic development, moving into infrastructure management, infrastructure investment, and moving into creating this as a socially equitable place as well, which means an aggressive investment in affordable housing. You don't need it now. I'll guarantee you you're going to need it in 5 or 10 years. So you've got to start soon on that. And the other thing is that you might end up adopting other neighborhoods that need your management strength. We're doing a lot of work in the city of Detroit, where the great downtown organizations are going to reach out to the neighborhoods and help them come back as well. So place management, you got to plan it, you got to upzone it, and of course, what place managers do best, do it. So here's a 3-part to-do list for you all. And the obvious one that I'm sure you all know, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, is that your number one asset is you're on the water. And you need to embrace your waterfront. The success of that new rental apartment project that's just going up right now is just proof that you can put anything on the water and it's going to do quite well. Every city that's a waterfront city has embraced their riverfront, their bayfront, their waterfront. So look at Savannah, look at Charleston, look at Chattanooga. They all turned their back on their bay or on their river, and they now embrace it. And it's one of the major reasons that they've come back so beautifully. And Water Street needs to be more passable. I know you've done some great work there with the bike lanes, but Jeff Speck's going to be here soon, and Jeff will help you with that. And you need a river walk that is a public park that's going to go for miles and miles up and down the waterfront. And then when you build all that space into high-density condominiums and retail facing the water, you're going to have to figure out, tough job, how do you spend all the money that you're going to make? Number 2, of course, is the arena. Arenas must be downtown. And you've got a big decision coming up on this. And the only thing I would say is it's got to lead to more mixed-use, walkable urban places, that if the entertainment strategy that they employ in whatever developer that you're working with, it must drive a mixed use and particularly residential. Residential real estate is 65% of all square footage. You need a whole lot more of that downtown. This redevelopment has to be driving residential, so whatever the first phase is, whether it's urban entertainment or whatever, it needs to drive a mix of uses, particularly residential. As I say, these arenas must be downtown, and you must have an arena to be a grown-up city anyway. So whether it's rehabbed or you're going to build a new one, there's an arena in your future. The third is parks. And I would suggest, and Elizabeth may throw me out of here real quick, is that the Mobile Alliance take over the operations of parks here in your downtown. Rent them for $1 a year from the city. The city should first bring them up to snuff from a capital point of view, and then either a separate organization or a division of the Downtown Alliance create a dedicated funding source, whether it be increased bid assessments, which I know is hard to take, or membership, or vendor rentals on the Christmas festival that you're going to have there, and have aggressive program management, and then open up that programming through a crowdsource platform to allow lots of other people to plug and play, come to the parks and hold birthday parties and hold ethnic events that are on the public park. So you've got a great future. You've got an incredible set of assets here, and you are well on your way to being the next Savannah, the next New Orleans. Keep it up. Thank you so much.